right. If other people will join, maybe they will trickle in shortly. But first off, thank you so much for being here this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are, for our inaugural Fontan Outcomes Network onboarding session. Dr. Opatowski and Dr. Reichik, if you can make it, are both co-directors, executive co-directors of the network. And Michelle Eversole, our project manager, is also here. I'm Lauren Blizzard, the Regulatory Affairs Specialist supporting FON. I just wanted to say before we get into the thick of things, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the network and joining us in this venture. I just want to say no matter what area you're supporting FON in, you're integral to this network and our success. And thank you for impacting these patients' lives. So a little bit about what we're going to go through tonight. We are going to talk about the vision, mission, and purpose of FON, a little bit about the structure of the registry, and then I'm going to walk you through the specific documents that you've gotten in the legal and regulatory packet. I do want to make this a really conversational session. So if at any point you have questions about any of this, just stop me and let's get those questions answered. So at this point, Dr. Opatowski, if you would mind telling us about our mission and vision.
All right, terrific. So most of this will involve the specifics of the regulatory considerations, but it makes sense to start with why we're doing this. And I will say that I'm a little bit saddened at first to look at all these names that I don't know, and I'm very excited to meet you all and work with you, and then realize we'll have the chance to do that, but it just won't be in person for a while. But welcome everybody to this. It's very exciting to see this start to take on legs. It's been a long time in the making. So let's get back to the beginning and ask what is FON? And so the Fontan Outcomes Network is a lifespan learning network created by and for a community of patients, families, clinicians, and researchers who together seek to transform outcomes for all people who are affected by single ventricle heart disease. FON will facilitate research, drive improvement, and spark innovation. And so our mission is really to optimize the longevity of life and the quality of life for individuals with a Fontan circulation. And we'll do that by dramatically improving physical health and functioning, which is often the focus of medical care, but also on neurodevelopment and emotional health and resilience. And our vision is really to improve outcomes, including quality of life for all individuals with single ventricle heart disease and the Fontan circulation. Go to the next slide. And so how will we accomplish that mission and vision? And here are listed 6 sort of buckets of ways we're going to do that. One is, and where a lot of our work has been to date, is to develop a registry that will catalog clinical data and accurately map the clinical trajectory throughout the lifespan of a person born with single ventricle heart disease. That data will really serve the foundation of a lot of the work of FON. We'll also then use that to apply quality improvement science and create a collaborative learning platform together, learning from each other's experiences and feedback through data. We'll also be able, with that data, to provide a rich foundation of clinical information and phenotype data to partner with biorepository efforts, genotyping efforts, and other basic scientists. And more typically, as we would do in a clinical registry, of course, conduct investigation, clinical investigation, exploratory research, and over time integrate clinical trials and other nested studies within FON using the infrastructure that and data that have been developed. As important as all that, and in some ways what makes FON the most special is that it really has already started to become and will continue to build a community of patients, families, clinicians, and scientists. And that's not always straightforward. It's not the most efficient way to create a database or registry, but the value that is developed by having people who care about this question, this issue in very different ways, all intensely, has been really close to miraculous to see. And finally, one important thing is that FON really doesn't intend to be very focused on what might be a reasonable question for a clinician or a clinical patient now, but really we would like to partner with diverse stakeholders to augment the impact of the network, whether that be basic scientists, pharmaceutical companies, big data companies, whatever it takes to really advance the science and care for patients with single ventricle heart disease. Now, I just want to say one thing before I pass the baton to Jack. This slide describes well some of the concrete things that FON will do to achieve our goals, but it also makes an assumption and leaves something unsaid, and that none of this would be possible at all without the deep commitment and support of centers and providers to commit themselves to working together to create the Fontan Outcomes Network. And we don't take that for granted at all, and deeply appreciate your efforts and the resources you and your centers are committing to make this happen. We are sure that there will be bumps along the way, and those are going to vary between sites. And so we won't be able to address everything in this forum or even over time in larger forums. And I'd really encourage each of you to reach out to anyone on our incredible team when any issues arise, so that we can help to work with you to address them and share those lessons with other centers as well. So I'm very excited to see you all here today, and I'll pass this on to Jack.
Thanks, thanks, Sasha. That was very well said, it does, to a degree, describe the ambitious nature of what we are attempting to do here, but it is mandatory and long overdue for us to really work between centers and begin to answer some of these really critically important questions. The only way to answer the myriad of questions that we have is to appropriately and accurately collect the data that best characterizes and catalogs, those are words I like to use, each of these individual patients. So how are we going to catalog and collect the data? We're going to be looking at a prospective enrollment with informed consent of all individuals of all ages living with a Fontan circulation. So this is an approach to recruit both pediatric population and fortunately the growing adult population as well. We're going to utilize the strategy of a central IRB with data use agreements between centers, and Lauren and others will go through that with you once we're done with our introductions. Enrollment through a participating care center will be mandatory. So in other words, it's not going to be individual patients that are going to be recruited through this effort. It's going to be through the various centers that are participating in FON. And our objective is enrollment initially, but then longitudinal data collection, which is so critically important to answering so many questions. What does that 3-year-old look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Gosh, being able to catalog a set of data that characterizes each of these patients is going to be just so valuable. And many of us can't wait to begin to look at that data. Next slide. Well, yeah, so ambitious. 1,000 individuals within the first year. We anticipate getting about 10,000 patients within the first 3 years. We predict that we estimate that there are about 20,000 individuals with a Fontan circulation across the United States alive today. So that gives you a sense of the scope of what we're looking to do. Next. The strategy for enrollment. Initial enrollment at the time of the Fontan operation itself. So we're looking at 12 initiating centers, founding centers that are going to kick this off. And each of those centers do perform Fontan surgeries on a regular basis. And so we'll be looking to recruit those patients as soon as they're done with their surgical rehabilitation and completion. As well as capturing these patients at these outpatient encounters. So we know that each of these are going to be having regular care at Fontan specialty or general cardiology clinics, kids, adolescents, and young adults. And that's where we're going to want to recruit them from. Next. So we can go on to the next animation here in a very simplistic way. This is how I demonstrate what we're going to be looking at. And of course, everyone else on this call is going to be looking at all the details of the regulatory aspects. But from a broad perspective, There's going to be input and output. The input will be coming from the care centers, cardiac care centers, looking at specific data at specific intervals, uploading the data to the Broad Institute. You'll probably hear a little bit more about Broad from others shortly. And then the output will be analytics for QI process charts from the learning network perspective, generating ongoing learning, as well as data that will then populate a registry that will be available for prospective and retrospective research, QI work, and the generation of new knowledge. Next.
All right, thank you, Jack and Sasha, for walking us through the why we're here and the how we're going to make it happen. So next, we're going to look at, once I said, specific documents that were in your legal and regulatory packet. And I do want to make you aware at this point that we are recording this session for hopeful use for future people, for future teams that are onboarding. So if at any time you want to ask a question, but you're not comfortable asking that in the recording, feel free to email either the info line or myself, and we'll get to those questions. So there were two main documents in the legal portion of the packet: the BAA, or the Business Associate Agreement, and the DUA, or the Data Use Agreement. I don't know what you perhaps do at your institution, but if it was me, I would have passed this on directly to my legal team. So maybe you're handling those, maybe you're not. But for all intents and purposes, the BAA is specifically talking about how we're going to handle PHI, private patient information. And then the DUA is going to outline specific details about how our institutions are going to work together, how we're going to use that data. This is all I'm going to talk about, these two documents. Does anyone here have specific questions that we could get answered about these now? Okay. We can always ask questions at the end too, if you happen to think about something, but we're going to move on to the regulatory portion of the packet as it's significantly larger. So I do want to talk about really quick why we're doing an SIRB format for this reliance. So an SIRB you may or may not have worked with before, depending on NIH requirements or other multi-site center studies that you're doing. But we just thought that it was easier, more efficient, and more accurate in how we're handling all of these documents. So a lot of multi-site challenges are going to be mitigated using this. And then all of our documentation processes, just to make them consistent across the board, it just makes everything easier. So the way that works is all of the sites will use the Cincinnati Children's IRB as their main umbrella IRB. So everything oversight-wise is going to be ceded to Cincinnati Children's. At the very beginning of this process, you should probably contact your IRB, some representative, so that they know that this is happening. They may want you to fill out somewhat of a placeholder IRB application, just so they can keep track of the research that's going on at your institution. They may also have a very specific portal that you can use to fill out these documents that I'm going to have. So you may just want to contact them first and foremost. They know what's going on. All documents that are going to need to be filed, we will file, but you may also want to keep copies on hand for your own records. Your site is actually going to be responsible for city training or other human subjects research training, your CVs up to date, things like that. The PI is just going to sign a document that says they have oversight that your staff is properly trained. So we're not going to keep track of that, you can, but everything else pretty much will come through us. These are the main documents that you should have seen attached to that email I sent out. So we're going to talk through mainly the consent form and the protocol. I'm assuming are going to bring up the biggest questions. The others are more forms that will need to be filled out just for the logistical side of getting reliance. So the consent form is actually a consent template. So your site can change specific sections to make them applicable for you. So there's privacy language, site-specific contact information that's going to need to be changed. Maybe others, depending on how you do consenting or assenting, depending on what age someone is. Things like that that can be site-specific. You can definitely request a change. Please change those in a tracked version of a Word document and then send them back to me for approval, because we can't accept overarching changes that would change the message of the consent form. If translations are going to be required by your site, you know in advance you're going to possibly enroll a large number of people in a certain population or a certain language, then you're going to need to have the consent form approved first, then get it translated and submit the translation and certificate back to us. If you have any questions about that process, just let me know and I can walk through the whole thing. It's kind of a back and forth situation, but it's best that those get translated up front so you have them if you need them. The protocol we've attached for reference. No changes can be made to that, but everyone should understand it thoroughly. So any staff that are being onboarded, please have them read through that protocol. If your site would like to make a log documenting that protocol training, you certainly can, but we are not going to be keeping track of that, so you can keep that for your own purposes. Before I go on, these are the two biggest documents probably that you might have questions on. So is there any questions so far? Okay. Next, we have the PI responsibility sheet and the protocol specific application to rely. These are both handled by your PI. Basically, they're signing off that they understand what responsibilities they have, and they understand that we're ceding reliance to the Cincinnati Children's IRB. And then they're also asserting that the staff that they have delegated these duties to do have the proper qualifications. The next thing that they're going to need is any ancillary reviews, which they might not be aware of, but an IRB representative would be able to help figure that out. Anything that's specifically needed by your site that wouldn't necessarily be handled by the umbrella. So once they have verified that all of those ancillary reviews have been completed and the staff are all certified, those two documents should be complete. Next, we have the site information sheet. This is filled out by your IRB staff. Another reason to contact them early and let them know what's going on. This is basic information about your site, about how their IRB is, its accreditation, AHRP accreditation, different ways that your site handles other human subjects research specifics. So that can be completed specifically by them. And then the SMART IRB acceptance and flexibility agreement, that may also be by the IRB. So that's the SMART agreement is agreement that many institutions have entered into that basically says this is how we've agreed to work on single IRB studies together. So it's a mutual agreement. We just have some specifics of how we're going to use that agreement that we hope that you will agree to. So if your IRB will look over that and get the requisite signatures, that would be great. Any questions on these or anything I've covered previously? Okay. The staff listing, very self-explanatory. It's the equivalent basically to a DOA log. We're going to ask for contact information, just the check mark to the training. We don't actually need the document, just making sure that everyone is on there. I'm going to periodically reach out to your staff as well, just to see if there are any updates. I know the staff changes all the time, so I need to update that in our system as well. Hopefully soon there will be an electronic system that we can go on. I will just send you an application to sign up for, and we can do that all automatically, which would be great. As for sending us documentation for certification, only the PI at your site is required to send those documents to me. The site PI attestation, similar to the other documents we talked about previously, that's just one signature saying that every person listed on the staff listing has actually received that credentialing that they are required to. That's all the documents that are in that packet. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to me at these two emails. We do have a shared email inbox that's at the top, and then my personal email below. But any other questions on these documents that I can get answered tonight?
Lauren, it's Jack. In the absence of anybody asking any questions, I'm just going to have people think about their questions. But one question I do have is a broad one that perhaps you can address from the following perspective. We're not reinventing the wheel here. So this process exists of a single IRB, multi-center studies, different centers, each reviewing these documents. In fact, perhaps you've worked with these very centers that have participated in previous and other multi-center studies. What types of challenges should we anticipate? What are the sorts of things that you see that we might need to deal with at individual centers?
First and foremost, I think the two most challenging documents to get completed are going to be the two legal documents. And for most people on this call tonight, it's not your realm or wheelhouse, maybe it's your legal department's. So that may not have anything to do with you. It just does take a while for two institutions to talk to each other and come to an agreement. As far as the regulatory aspect of it, I would think that most issues that arise are probably because your IRB doesn't know that this is coming. So if you just let them know in advance that these documents are coming, they can help you work through that. I know for our IRB, how they like to run things is a notification that something's coming, and then they want all of the documents uploaded in a specific portal. They won't review them outside of the online portal. Your site may be different, but just contacting them ahead of time, finding out those SIRB policies in advance of submitting anything is probably the best way to go.
Hey, Lauren, this is Kelly Benziel from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I have a question about the city training for the data collectors or the team that's going to be doing the data entry into the fund registry. Is that a requirement for them, or is it not required because they're not part of the consenting aspect of the study?
Sure. That's going to be different site to site. So once again, the PI is attesting that their site is following their policies in regards to training. So we take the PI's word that everyone has been trained. I know for our site, which I can only speak to Cincinnati Children's, but if someone is doing the job that their job description has, regardless of research, so say it's someone doing an echo and they only do echoes all day long and they happen to be helping on a research study, they don't have to be on a DOA log or something like that, don't have to complete that. So maybe that answers your question, but what I would just say is check with your site, and if your PI is signing off to make sure that everyone is good to go with all their training, then we'll take that and we'll accept that. Anyone else have any questions?
What have we set as the deadline for this? I can't remember. I think it was included in the original emails, but what's our time frame here?
I don't believe I set a hard deadline. Everything is, I think the regulatory, like I said, the regulatory packet will be the easier side of things. We just ask that these happen as soon as possible, because everything that's happening on your end may take a while to get going, but it also needs to go through our IRB as well afterwards. So the soonest that you can get those documents to me, the soonest I can get that going. And then if we have IRB approval and we're ready to go, and all we're waiting on is the legal documents, that's best case scenario for us.
And so historically, just again, in previous types of activities like this, it could take either weeks or months, is my understanding. Is that correct? Variable from site to site.
Time. We're very hopeful that this will be an easy process. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. Like I said, the legal departments have very sometimes strict parameters under which they work, but we've tried to make it as easy on our end as we can. So hopefully it will be very soon.
And I think we do anticipate that each center is going to have its own questions that either legal or regulatory will ask about, and Lauren and the rest of us are all available to address those. this is definitely an area in flux, and actually for that reason really exciting, because I think that a few years ago many fewer centers were really open to this sort of collaboration, and this is very exciting to be able to do this.
Has anyone started on the packet and gotten all of the documents completed yet, and you're just waiting for this session to send them to me? Maybe soon. I did want to let everyone know that sometimes, in my opinion, a phone call is worth 1,000 emails. So if for some reason you're running into some hiccups, please feel free to ask me for my phone number and I will be glad to jump on a call with you if that will help clear things up.
And to clarify, if a phone call is worth 1,000 emails, is that good or bad?
I think it's good.
Okay. I don't want 1,000 emails, but I see what you're saying. Diane and Stacy, is it okay if we introduce you?
Of course.
So Diane and Stacy, Diane Pickles and Stacy Lynn are also on our executive leadership team and are both parents of children, adult and pediatric, with single ventricle heart disease who have had a Fontan operation. I don't know if you each want to say something about yourselves and your thoughts.
This is Diane. Thank you very much for all being on the call. We are, I think I can safely speak for everyone on the ELT in saying we are incredibly excited about FON launching. But I know I can speak for, safely speak for sure for patients and families, and saying that we are incredibly grateful for your hard work, both that you've already put in and that you will be putting in the weeks and months to come, because we're really so hopeful for the research and QI that will, and learning and improvements that will come out of FON. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just simply, this is Stacy, and I just echo everything that Diane said, and really looking forward to getting started with data entry and improvements.
Thanks so much, Diane, Stacy. This is the first step to getting that data entry entered. So if I can help with anything, please send me an email. Everyone on the FON staff would be happy to help. So if there are no further questions, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Right.